Welcome to the Fascia-Informed Therapist, the essential podcast for occupational therapy professionals looking to deepen their understanding of fascia's pivotal role in therapy and health. I'm your host, Amy Mayer, an experienced occupational therapist, practice owner, and dedicated educator. Here we'll dive into the fascinating world of fascia, exploring its significance in the human body and its critical influence on occupational therapy practice. Each episode will bring you cutting-edge insights, expert interviews, and practical strategies to help you confidently integrate the science of fascia into your therapeutic approach. Whether you're a seasoned practitioner or just starting out, our goal is to equip you with high-quality, evidence-based, and fascia-informed continuing education opportunities that will enhance your skills and benefit your clients. So join us as we unravel the complexities of fascia and transform the way you practice occupational therapy. All health and wellness practitioners are welcome. Let's learn, grow, and evolve together. Hi, this is Amy, and welcome to another edition of the Fascia-Informed Therapist. I'm here with Kaitlyn Rambo again. Hi, Kaitlyn.
Hi, everybody.
Today we wanted to talk about yesterday, what we did yesterday. And what did we do yesterday, Kaitlyn?
We did a lot of things yesterday, but we held another in-person Fascia-Informed CEU class. So teaching myofascial release basics and a very brief introduction of fascia science. I say brief, but that was kind of 4 hours of fascia science to OTs and PTs who came and attended for that in-person CEU course.
This is one of the few in-person CE classes that we teach, and I started teaching this class in 2018 and have taught it for several organizations here in Omaha, Nebraska, and in Iowa, and then we just actually went and taught it in South Dakota for the South Dakota APT Association's spring meeting. So yesterday was a super fun day, and we had a really nice mix of OT and PT. And let's talk first about what the class consists of. So the title of it is Myofascial Release for Traditional Healthcare Practitioners. And, well, maybe I should talk first about why I created the class in the first place. Because I didn't necessarily plan to do a lot of CE in my practice. I knew I wanted to offer courses for the public, to teach them self-treatment, to teach them a little bit about meditation and stress management and other things that they can do to help themselves. But then it just sort of somehow evolved out of requests to teach other practitioners how to do it. And part of the reason that I really wanted to do it was because I'm not seeing enough traditional practitioners use myofascial release techniques. And Kaitlyn, you are someone who is unique and met someone a long time ago who uses it in a traditional setting, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a part of my story is that I used to work at an inpatient rehab hospital back in Washington before OT school, and there was a physical therapist there who did myofascial work with patients on our CVA units and our spinal cord injury units and our traumatic brain injury units, and he utilized that technique with people in their beds and in the therapy gyms and in their wheelchairs, and I got that as a way to get people to do therapy because pain was one of the number one reasons why people and therapists got refusals in that setting, but also it was another way to increase their engagement in different therapy activities. And so I got to float with him all around and see how that was used in that very specific practice setting. But that kind of gave me such an advantage because I got to come to OT school and not just want to learn more, but in a backwards way compared to most therapists who find myofascial work. I already saw how it was used in traditional practice settings, and I already saw how it could be used. And on all my rotations, I could see, oh, this is how you'd use it with a kiddo in outpatient peds, or this is how you would use it at XYZ. Versus I feel like most people go to OT school, and then maybe they eventually find myofascial work, and then maybe they're trying to make that integration, versus my path has kind of been backwards in a way. Not that I'm complaining about it, but different.
Just different. I've also been somebody, I learned myofascial release from a practitioner in a very traditional setting as well, my first year out of OT school. So I have also used it in pretty much every possible setting imaginable, because my second job was working with a small private practice that contracted with many, many different types of settings. And so I could easily see how it fits into traditional settings. And I think, especially now that we have the science, a lot of the science about the fascial system, it makes so much sense for it to be in traditional settings. But I wasn't seeing that happen. And in this podcast, may say some things that might ruffle a few feathers, maybe, but I was also seeing and hearing from therapists, young therapists, experienced therapists, that they would go to a workshop to learn Barnes myofascial release, but they couldn't necessarily, there two things happened. They couldn't necessarily see how it translated into their own practice. And secondly, they had experiences that kind of turned them off to it. Mm-hmm. And then they throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. And I think the science is definitely pointing to the Barnes technique. Wouldn't you agree? The principles mm-hmm. behind it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it made me feel bad that they were, as I said, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because they would go to a myofascial 1 class, for example, and see all this, dare I say, weird stuff going on mm-hmm. with the unwinding. And I'm labeled an advanced practitioner in the Barnes technique. So I've been through a lot of classes. I've been through the unwinding. I get it. I've felt it. I think it's extremely valuable healing tool. But for someone who's never experienced myofascial work before, particularly the Barnes style, to come into a level 1 class and see that weird thing happening can be a massive turnoff, especially if they don't know any of the science around fascia or myofascial release. Yeah. And I know you went to mm-hmm. a level 1 class. Will you talk about your experience a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, thankfully I had a little bit of a warning from you of just saying like, hey, this stuff might happen. And I did see some of that stuff and wasn't really sure how to handle it. And I thankfully was somebody that had already taken the in-person CE class with you and some other workshops, so I came in with a little bit of background. But I remember packing up all my books that you recommended to me, and I took those with me all the way back to Washington, and I took those with me to the class, and we didn't talk about any of that stuff, and maybe that's something that we'll talk about later in this conversation today. But I specifically remember talking to other PTs and OTs who were there, and they're from their very traditional outpatient practices wanting to learn this technique as another tool in their toolbox, and kind of having that look of like, oh, I don't know about that stuff, and that's not something that we could ever bill for in healthcare, or this isn't something that we could ever use in our outpatient clinic. So am I going to be labeled as some of that stuff over there, even though I'm here to learn this technique to have as another tool in my toolbox, you know? And so that was some of the conversations that we had. And for me, it was something that was really eye-opening, but also kind of alluded to the fact that when I went to that workshop, or to myofascial 1, I purposely didn't tell anybody that I was a student because that was right before I started my year of rotations. But also I didn't know if this was going to happen, but I was afraid that people were going to find out that I was a student, and they were going to say, oh, go ahead, student, go sit in the back and watch. And when you pay $800 for a class, you know, that's not really what you want. And so thankfully I got lots of hands-on experience, and I'm very glad that I went to that course to get that hands-on experience. But as far as the science piece, I didn't get that connection. And then on top of seeing some of that, air quotes, weird other stuff, you know, there's a lot of people who do find that valuable, but when you're trying to take the tool and then take that tool into a hospital or an outpatient clinic, you know, you don't want to be labeled as one without the other. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think that ick kind of comes in? Or the hesitation, for lack of better words.
Yeah, I guess I've just heard a lot of people comment that stuff is just voodoo. And I used to be called a voodoo queen early in my career. And my response was, well, it works. I can't explain it, but it works. And there's so many other things that we do that aren't really highly supported by high quality evidence in healthcare at large, not just OT or PT. Mm-hmm. So I guess the frustrating part is when so many people can come back to a level 1, many experienced practitioners who've been through unwinding and advanced unwinding like myself come back into level 1 and they just start unwinding when they know that the person that's working on them may be brand new at this and doesn't know anything that they're walking into other than they've come to learn a manual therapy technique. Mm-hmm. And if anyone is in the Barnes organization is listening, I would love for there to be a rule that in myofascial 1, if you're coming back in, please don't unwind. Mm-hmm. Because the person that you're working with might be a newbie and they have no idea what to do with you. Yeah. And it can potentially scare away practitioners that might otherwise be incredible myofascial therapists down the line.
Yeah, but and I would say just aside from the shock factor, as a newbie trying to learn the technique, the person on my table wasn't necessarily unwinding, but I could see other people, and so I was wondering, well, am I doing something wrong? My person's not doing that. Do I need to be doing that? It just created a lot of questions because there wasn't a lot of explanation about that, where I was overthinking what I was trying to learn, and especially trying to learn something brand new. Mm-hmm. That just was something where I felt like I needed external validation from you later on in my rotation, being like, okay, am I doing this right? Because I'm not really sure. And that just created those questions.
The other fear I've heard practitioners bring up as newbies going into a myofascial 1 course and then seeing other people unwind is unwinding, as you know now, can get pretty wild. Mm-hmm. And with the movement and growling or screaming. And I've heard people say to me, I was scared that was going to happen to me. Mm-hmm. And I was going to somehow unwind, and that seemed really terrifying to them as a new therapist, having never seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm. So that's another, I think, problem when what I'm trying to do is bridge that gap between what a therapist is learning to do myofascial work and to see how, yes, it can be a simple manual therapy technique that you can apply just like all these other manual therapy techniques that we have available to us. Mm-hmm. And it's not this crazy voodoo thing. But again, you can take it farther. And I have had therapists who have come to my introductory myofascial courses that have then gone on to take Barnes classes. Mm-hmm. And then they're better prepared for, hey, these other things might happen as well.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily to invalidate those other things. It's just for people looking for this technique to use in traditional healthcare. The rest of traditional healthcare is not caught up to all that. And so that might be a rabbit hole as far as research that hopefully comes in the future, but that's not where it's at today. And so when practitioners are looking for a tool that they can leave to use today, they want to be able to know that they have the evidence and they have the science and they have the skills to use it and document and bill for it, because you can in traditional healthcare settings. And so that's, I think, why the course that we taught yesterday is that great gap, because the first half of the day they were able to learn the science and see these references that were in the last 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 years, that makes this information relevant, but also how does that information become clinical application in these different traditional practice settings? And then also, how does that give the proof to the pudding behind the myofascial release technique that you will now have in your toolbox? And I think that's what makes a big difference. And so we have a lot of people who have taken a Barnes course and have raved it and had really great things to say. And then they also come to this to learn some of the science. And so we're not saying don't do one versus the other, but integrating both is what bridges that gap.
And I would say something that I am trying to teach therapists and this became really clear from the people that we had in the course yesterday that have taken Barnes courses. And I teach how to use one-handed techniques doing myofascial work as opposed to doing cross hands. And one of the therapists who's been doing the Barnes myofascial work for 4 years said, really? I don't have to cross my hands because my body aches. It's very hard to sustain for the length of time. And we teach how you can use one hand, but you can use the body to provide its own resistance to create that traction with the shear effect. And it works fantastic because then you as the therapist can move your body and use lots of different muscles in order to hold that sustained shear that we know we need in this particular technique. The other thing that we show in this course is how to use a table that goes up and down. And the therapists that came to the course were saying, oh my gosh, this is an amazing lifesaver. However, in the Barnes courses, especially in the unwinding courses, they talk about having a light table that you can easily move out of the way when someone begins to unwind. And I think that can definitely be important, but to me, the greater importance is the safety for the therapists. And I think you would agree, you can share your opinion on this, having a table that goes up and down allows you to access their body in more different ways, and it allows you to use your body in more different ways. Yes?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was something that, knowing that I was going to be doing this job full time was looking at other ways to help myself. And now that I've been somebody that's been doing this work for a little over a year now, but then also somebody who helps teach this course that we taught yesterday, I feel like half of what I'm doing is teaching other therapists, hey, this is how you can adapt your body so that you can hold these principles that align with the science and with the Barnes technique longer, but also keep your body safe so that you can do this work longer. Because it's no secret that, for example, somebody who does massage therapy, they might last 7 to 8 years before their body has to give out. And so granted, in the OT and PT world, obviously we're incorporating a lot of other tools in our toolbox on top of the myofascial release technique and, exercises and movements and a lot of different aspects on top of it. But at the end of the day, I'm in my first year of this career and I hope to do this for a lifetime. And so finding those ways that I can keep myself safe and my body feeling good, but then also being able to effectively utilize the technique so that the patient or the client on the table is actually able to feel something beneficial to them, then that's a win-win for me.
Yes, and Kaitlyn mentioned the average career span of a massage therapist in the literature anyway is 7 to 8 years, and of course that's an average. I know massage therapists that have lasted longer. I know some that have lasted shorter, but I so believe in this technique that I want people to be able to use it for a long, long time throughout their career because it's so beneficial. And just for context, Kaitlyn is 26, I am 57, and I want to be able to sustain this in my own body for as long as I possibly can because, again, I see that benefit. And then going back to the table issue and being able to move it out of the way, I've been doing myofascial release for 32 years, and the amount of times I've had somebody unwind off my table is probably 3 or 4. And that was only because I was working with people who have been to Barnes courses and knew how to unwind. Do I have unwinding on my table? I've had lots of unwinding of necks and arms and legs. I've had thaw experiences. I've had people report visions, memories, start laughing, start crying. I mean, there's all kinds of unwinding, but for someone to unwind to that extent and outside of an unwinding class, I think is incredibly rare. So in my opinion, having a table that helps me help myself and my clients better outweighs the need to be able to move it around.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and obviously, you know, these tables are something that's more expensive and things like that. And obviously, if you have the opportunity to get something like that, then as two therapists that utilize a therapy table for a lot of different reasons outside of the myofascial release technique, then it's great to be able to have a table that moves up and down, which is why most tables in your OT and PT schools have that capability, whether it's electric or mechanical, right? They have that availability for a reason, and that's so that you can use it in so many different ways. And so
yeah, that's a good point. They're not nearly as common in the massage world, but they're extremely common in PT and OT. And just side note, I do not own stock in these tables.
yes.
So I'm not promoting them for that reason, simply for safety and better ergonomics.
Yeah, I would say another thing that makes what we taught yesterday and in your course specifically a little bit different than what the Barnes organization teaches is just so much of that science connection. And that's just because you and now I and you have taken the time to really delve into that research to make those connections between the tool that we're using, the evidence behind we're using it, and the clinical application to traditional settings. And I think that's why a lot of people seek these courses out, is because they're like, okay, we went to this and we can see how it works and we know how it works based on our experiences, but I want to be able to explain the science about why it works to other people. And to an extent, there's some of that in the Barnes course. And, you know, that was something where I had my myofascial 1 packet, and my first day here with you, I showed you the packet that I got, and the packet was the same, if not similar, from when you took the same myofascial 1 course 20 years prior. And so, not that that research is irrelevant, but it is, you know, there's a lot of new information that's pouring out about it, and we need to start including that more and more. And there have been shifts in the Barnes organization for that, and I'm saying that as somebody who's not an active part of the Barnes organization, but you can see how they're starting to do that. But we need to do that in a way so that that science can be applied to healthcare, because that's where there's going to be such a huge benefit.
Yeah, that was something I think that was surprising to the therapists yesterday and the therapists that have come in the past, is we spend the morning talking about the science. And what I want therapists to know is that you can use myofascial techniques to address far more than pain in the body. You're affecting potentially proprioception and interoception, your mobility, the ability to access the energy storage capacity in your body for better mobility and better walking. So when you teach therapists all this new science that's coming out, it expands their thinking into what they can do with it and why. We had an amazing conversation yesterday about balance, and simply understanding something as scientifically proven and simple as the retinaculum across your ankle is the most highly innervated structure in the body kind of blows up your mind in terms of thinking, oh, wow, that should be part of every balance class. Do they have good ankle range of motion? And do they have good fascial motion of the tissues around it?
Yep.
So this information's, my goal is not to gatekeep any of this. My goal isn't to turn people necessarily to or away from the Barnes organization. If anything, anybody who knows me will say, yes, go to these things. They're important. But when you go to your first one, or to go with some knowledge about what you might see, so that they don't run away going, what just happened?
Yeah. Well, and I think another piece that's important to note too is, and I wouldn't necessarily say this is true for just courses in the Barnes organization, but there's a lot of courses out there that you attend and they say, this is the tell-all be-all. And I think that's one thing that we really try to make different is that, hey, here's the science, here's the clinical application. This is one way of how you can take that information and that science and apply it to this with this technique in your toolbox, but also please go find others because there's so much science pouring out that this isn't necessarily the tell-all be-all. Yes, you are at a class to learn the science in the morning and to have some hands-on piece in the afternoon so you have some of these skills and tools to use tomorrow in whatever practice setting you're in, but also go seek out more information. Please go and do. This is just an introductory to start to have your brain thinking differently about how the evidence can be applied clinically in traditional healthcare settings. Mm-hmm. And we want people to continue that journey. We don't want people to say, oh, I found this and it works and that's all I'm going to do. To an extent, if it works and you see its use in healthcare settings, then please do use it. But also make sure that, we're all lifetime learners, right? As OTs, as PTs, or as other health and wellness professionals. So we want you to feel empowered to keep seeking information so that you can be most evidence-based in your practice.
Absolutely. I think the world in general, no matter what area you're in, even outside of healthcare, is a constant evolution, right? And I would say that in my practice and what I've asked you to do with me as well is we're pretty much a purist when it comes to the principles of myofascial release, and particularly the Barnes style myofascial release. But we have definitely layered in our own thinking to how we offer that therapeutic approach here. And the integration of the science behind it, and also all the wellness aspects, because what we really want to focus on is not just doing the technique and then sending people out in the world. We want to focus on how did that tension get there in the first place, and what can we empower our clients with in order to try to help them manage that tension as they go back out into the world. And some of those things are
Posture.
Posture is a huge. Other things would be how people move, their mobility and exercise choices. And you just talked about it a lot in another work. Kaitlyn just taught our level 1 self-treatment workshop, and you talked a lot about your mobility should go outside of the linear planes, right? Multiplanar, I think is the word you were tossing around. Yeah, so that would be another one. And then I know lots of Barnes practitioners do teach people self-treatment. I think that's incredibly important to help them. And we do that, of course, a lot here in clinical sessions, but also in the workshops that we teach. Breathing, stress management, hydration, nutrition, all those aspects I think are important to empower your client with some things they can do, but also to improve the trajectory of their healing.
Yeah. Well, and outside of that too, as OTs and PTs, we don't ever want anybody to become dependent on our techniques. And so if we can empower you via knowledge from what's coming out about the most latest research and what that research is pointing to make sure that we're addressing not just the symptoms that you're feeling, but the cause of those symptoms and the potential root causes as to why you're feeling X, Y, and Z, whether that's pain, discomfort, limited range of motion, and limited mobility and stability in the body, right? It could be any number of those things, but we want to make sure, from a research level, okay, these are the aspects that research is pointing to when it talks about the fascial system. And so what are things that we can integrate into education and skills for you as a client or you as a patient in the hospital to be able to integrate those things? That way you're not dependent on us and you can go back into the world being pain-free and having that mobility and getting to live your life. As OTs and looking at occupations, right? that's our goal. But same for PTs, right? They want to make sure that there's a healthy, functioning body out there in the world. And so if that science allows us to do our jobs better, then great. And that's why I think that, I mean, you've talked about this in other podcast episodes, why that integration of having this tool in your toolbox and being an OT really can go hand in hand, just like it is with lymphatics or any number of things.
Yeah, I think it belongs in the most traditional of traditional settings, like acute care hospitals. I think just the simply teaching people, using myofascial techniques to help improve participation at that level could be very powerful. Well, you've seen it. It is powerful. I've seen it. It is powerful. Not could be. It is if you apply it. But then also teaching some basic self-care techniques to help people manage pain when they get home, I think could be super powerful in preventing readmissions. But then also taking the techniques into like school-based settings for OTs or outpatient pediatrics or skilled nursing, pelvic floor therapy. I mean, there's just so many. Mental health. Oh my gosh. I would love to see more self-treatment techniques being taught to mental health. We had a mental health therapist in a workshop a few weeks ago, and he was saying that he's had people that are in so much pain, physical pain, that they don't even want to get out of bed and participate in the groups and the therapy options that they have. So how powerful could that be? Because not everybody in that setting wants to be touched by another person, right? But give them a therapy ball and teach them how to do it themselves. Anybody wants to team up on that research, give us a call. But
I think the bridging that gap between the science and the clinical application doesn't just go on the therapist level, it also goes on the patient level. And something that we talked about yesterday in our course is, well, how do you get that buy-in from people? And it's showing them the evidence, and it's showing them, here's the proof in what we're doing. Here's the science behind fascia. Here's the science behind the fibroblast. Here's the science behind why posture is important. And that's where people start to make those connections. They're not just coming in and getting a treatment and I'm doing this weird technique that they found online that, works miracles, air quotes, right? But they're able to see the connection between the science is coming out and saying this is how we're using it on you, this is how it relates to you, your individual health, your future wellness, but also the problem areas that you have going on, and how me as an OT or how any other therapist that's potentially listening to this can apply that to them and their problems. I mean, we know that's what makes OT and PT in any number of healthcare settings very unique, is because we get to treat people and as individuals, but translating that science into what they have going on is what allows the patient to also know that we are somebody who is, we are doctorally trained, and we know how to read research, and we know how to read that literature and know how to apply it in a clinical setting. And so that also bridges the gap on the patient-client level too.
Yes, and some people would argue that the public doesn't care about the research. I call... because I say our clients, I would say most of our clients are totally fascinated. But the point is you can't take the research and read it to them, right? I think OTs and PTs are generally pretty gifted at translating that research into function. And that's what's right on the top of our website, is translating fascia science into action. So learning how to restate it in a way that is understandable and applicable to our patients and clients is what makes them go, oh, wow, I see how that works in my body now. And it might be the 17th time they've been told to drink water, but when they hear it applied in a different way, then that's one more angle that might make them adopt a better hydration habit, for example, or a better posture habit. So anyway, yesterday was just super fun because I feel like there's now, and that's the other thing we do, is we no more than 12 in our workshop because they feel our hands on them and every single technique that we do.
Yep.
So I feel like after yesterday, we have a whole handful more of fascia-informed therapists out in the world, excited to apply and probably excited to now go to another Barnes class and maybe look at the techniques they're learning in a slightly different way and be able to take that and apply it in a slightly different way as well.
Yeah.
So I think we'll wrap that up today, but thank you for taking the time to sit down and have this little reflection with me and put it out in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Fascia-Informed Therapist. It's been a pleasure sharing insights and strategies to help you integrate fascia science into your practice. I'm Amy Mayer, and I hope today's episode has inspired you to explore further and take your therapeutic skills to the next level. Remember, we're committed to creating and providing top-notch, evidence-based, fascia-informed continuing education that empowers you as an occupational therapy practitioner. Stay connected with us for more enriching content, and don't forget to check out our online courses to deepen your expertise. Until next time, keep expanding your knowledge, refining your skills, and confidently applying the science of fascia to your practice. Here's to advancing together in health and wellness.